on doing is conducting a human health risk assessment. We want to basically flush out any types of risks that are out there, the exposure to any of our city employees, any of the high users of the park. So that's the next steps. We're planning on starting that as soon as we get basically the green light to do it, and hopefully by the end of the summer we'll have our action plan in place and we can start mitigation as soon as the fall, late summer, fall, hopefully. So that's the aggressive approach to this whole situation right now.
Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Campbell.
Just one question. I've been reading up on arsenic. I'm led to believe that arsenic can occur in drilled wells totally away from civilization. So it occurs naturally in the ground at times. So how do we know this is not that occasion, that situation?
And arsenic can come in many forms. We get it whenever we eat seafood on a regular basis. There's arsenic content that we ingest. So there's inorganic arsenic and organic arsenic. So that's where we got to differentiate. If an individual were to come up and approach us saying that they received arsenic poisoning, it's a very timely process to undertake to verify, is it inorganic arsenic, organic arsenic. It's a more of a complex issue to verify, but there is methods in place.
As a party comment, Mike Duty, Councillor Duty can also comment that we both were catchers in the Major Fastball League. When someone slid into a home plate, you inhaled a whole bunch of this stuff, and I'm not sure it's affected either one of us, although there may be people that think otherwise. Thank you.
Councillor Dubo.
Thank you, Mayor Black. Scott, if you could, talked about that, the Amick Foster Wheeler report last time talks about that.
The levels are
Taken from
25 times higher.
Timmins Press. That in antimony, is that the way you pronounce that?
Pardon me, sir?
Antimony? Antimony?
Antimony, yeah.
Antimony and lead concentrations are greater in the surface soil than the underlying tailings layer. Do we have an explanation for that?
It's hard to determine. Again, different processes for back in the day than they are to today's current practice. So there are certain metals that are byproducts due to the extraction of the mining industry kind of. Again, back in the early 50s when this was first occurring, it's hard to determine what the practice was.
So just the fact that it's on the surface soil, so could that be coming from other operations is basically what comes to mind with me. We have the top plant there, and then we have the Hollinger project, right? So is that something that, well, obviously, you know, that'd be part of the whole underlying investigation, but if it's on the top of the soil, it seems like, you know, it's not coming from below, right? From the tailings itself.
And I have reason to believe that what happened in the past when they first moved it into a park process, they placed their fill on top. Basically, over the years, it hasn't really been touched by anybody over time. So as that top layer gets compacted, it just kind of dissolves and meshes in with the ground. So with this new plan going forward, we'll identify some mitigation measures. Maybe it might be a layering of certain materials. Maybe we put a clay liner over top that doesn't compact as easily as the materials in place before. So the likelihood of any type of surface exposure is going to be very limited from that point on. So, and those are the things that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of weeks, hopefully.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Councillor Ronaldo.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually got interviewed on this today, and my comment was that I think the public has a lot of questions, and very likely this may help answer them, but I'm more confused than ever when I started reading the different results that we've got here. I guess the only thing, I mean, it's $40,000 for this particular assessment that we're looking at, and we want to sole source this simply because they're the ones who've done the work. I guess that's my concern. I wouldn't have minded a third opinion. This was done for the MOE. I would like to have seen Amick Wheeler. I would have preferred somebody other than them. But was there that much of a difference, or are we doing it specifically because of the time? That's a little faster because they've already got the information?
Basically, that's the reason, the approach we took. If we were to go out for tender for an RFP, we would have looked at 3 to 4 weeks basically for a turnaround proposals to be received and then another evaluation period. So then we're looking at mid to late summer before we can select someone to take the report, review everything. And so that this was we'll say the opportunity to say, we almost have to not necessarily sole source, but just to help turn around a little bit faster than, just to provide some resolution to the entire issue.
Just to further clarify, because I was part of those discussions, it wasn't so much the fact that they have worked on it previously or done work in the area. They do have some of the leading experts in soil analysis in terms of health impacts working for them. But given that it is such a high concern in a highly used area of the public domain, we wanted to ensure that we got whatever remedial plans were required underway this year. The thought was if we went out to RFP tender, that timeline and that process and approval process would jeopardize us being able to get this project started and finished in the fall and may push it to next year, which was part of the discussion. But I understand, I told Scott and staff that part of the discussion tonight will be whether or not we sole source it or not. But in my opinion, due to the concern and level of concern in the community, it is beneficial to get the work done as soon as possible and get the actual remedial action required on our table. This, I can say, it has been a very confusing and frustrating process to be part of. Hearing that the MOE first looked at it back in 2000 and it hasn't come to council up until now, or that the reports were essentially internal and stayed within MOE till 2012 when they reviewed reports across the province. This isn't just a Hollinger Park Timmins issue. They've done this at mining properties across the province as part of their responsibility and jurisdiction to evaluate things as they go. I will say I have been sent by people who've been around in the community, I'll say a lot longer than me, or even predating my birth, articles from the paper where there was events and races and on fields that were referred to as the cyanide flats. So I don't believe that the area being a former mining area really comes as a shock to anyone who is well aware of the history of Timmins, but for those of us that have moved into the community more recent or perhaps weren't aware of that, or as time goes on, you learn different things about what these metals and contents can do to the human body. But it is something that is historical. We did ask the people at the meeting, you know, with the different levels of metal content versus the previous results, what is the opinion? The response was the sample locations are not all identical, so you're sampling different areas that you can't confirm whether it would have been higher or lower. At that point in time, if you sampled in the same location. One of the things we did do was sample in the playground area, and it came back negative in 2012. So I believe as part of this review, we are going to sample in that same area again and confirm whether it's still negative. That would tell us if it was something new that has developed in the area. Things have changed in that specific sample location, so sampling some of the same locations that was previously done would allow us to determine if something different has happened. I know council is aware that we did repaint our water tower as well. That was an activity that occurred between the time periods as well. And Scott can correct me if I'm right or not, but it is a lead-based paint that is used on the water tower. So there are a number of things that have changed, and hopefully this analysis will tell us what the steps forward are and possibly shed some light as to whether some of those areas have changed between 2012 and now that tested negative before.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you.
Councillor
Thank
Rinaldo.
you for the clarification in some ways, but it does seem to confuse me anymore, because I mean, I look at this and we're talking about surface, yet I look at the drilling was done at 2.4, 3.4 meters below ground. I remember the work, us asking back in September what they were drilling by what is now the hexagon that was there. They were drilling in September, and we were asking what they were drilling then. And I guess my confusion is, from one minute to the next, it's not going to harm us, and the other minute, it's always been there. It's never really done it unless you're going to eat the grass, eat the soil every day. It's not going to do you any harm, or if you're going to be rolling around in it and not changing your clothes and leaving them in your trunk, maybe they might do you a little bit of damage, but we get such mixed reasons. The amount that's there, I think what it is there is, and I'm hoping I'm saying this right, because I could piss some people out there, they could be upset with me, but there's a minority that's really concerned, and the majority that understands it's very likely not going to harm us if we don't sit there and eat the soil. And I guess that's my questioning, and you know, at $40,000, I would rather see that $40,000 put in another layer if that's what it needs. I'm just a bit confused as to where they were drilling, why they were drilling so deep, and just what is the actual damage, and that's the confusion. And the reports just made it more confusing. They didn't help in any way, because they turn around, like you said, I think you contradicted yourself, and that's what these do. They're 1 minute it's severe, they want us to work on it, and another they're going, no, you can still hold your events there, it's fine, it's not a big deal. Well, we only have 3 months of summer. If it's not a big deal, can we live with it? Is it harmful in any way? It doesn't give me the impression it is, or we'd be shutting it down right now. So I guess that, I know this is $40,000 just for the consulting fee. I know there's gonna be some money there, and I have no problem trying to fix it up. I'm just wondering at what the budget's going to be, and how badly do we need the consulting? If we have the figures and we're gonna do our own drilling anyways, even if they said the playground there was no problems in 2012, we still wanna do our own work on there? Do we still need the $40,000 consulting fee? If we're just gonna go ahead and drill where we think it should be done.
So the initial drilling that we did about 15 borehole drills. So the intent of the borehole drills was to determine the thickness of the current cap layer. So we
Okay.
determine right now that the cap layer is 7 centimeters to about 14 centimeters, so that's not that thick. So that's what's covering the tailings now. The rest of the other surface samples were 0 to 5 centimeters. We took about 27 of them, and then we determined there that that's where the metals were present in. So we did it sporadically throughout the entire park. So we covered basically, we'll say, 90% of the park already in that initial wave. If we do resample a little bit of the children's area, it won't be as intense. We're probably looking less than 7 samples just to verify in certain locations. So that's minor additional cost when it comes to that. The intent of this study is basically a health risk assessment. That minority group that was mentioned, this will basically help put everyone at ease between the ones that don't really look at this as a large issue and then the ones that do look like it as a large issue. So
I think part of the issue too is going through the health assessment and having a expert in the field tell you we need 2 inches, we need 3 inches, we need 4 inches based on those contents, versus the city going and adding an inch and then doing further soil sampling down the road and now saying, okay, now we have an inch and 7 centimeters cap on top of the park. We don't know if that's sufficient. So we need the consultant to come back and say, given these levels, you should have X amount of inch cap on top of the park, or you should remove the soil in these locations and put in fresh soil. In terms of contradicting, all I can tell everyone in the public or at this council table is if a single person in any meeting I've been in on Hollinger Park told me they thought we should close the park down and stop activity in it, it would have been closed by now. That's all I can say. I only can go on the recommendations and the advice I have. At the same time, health officials across the board do say the most desired situation is 0 metal content in your surface soils. So that is why, although they have identified regular use can continue, they are still of the opinion that 0 metal content in your surface soils is the best case scenario and recommend that we proceed with this action. So I get the mixed messaging, but I can only follow the health officials from the health unit, MOE, and Public Health Ontario in terms of what they're providing us. But if a single person from any of those 3 organizations would have said, Steve, I think you should close Hollinger Park or not host baseball, soccer, Canada Day, I would have told staff to close the park and come to council with a special meeting request saying the park is closed because of this reason. Does council agree with keeping it closed until it's resolved? And that message has not come from a single person involved in this process.
Can I continue?
Yep.
So this report, the $40,000, will they tell us the levels that we need to put in certain areas, or will that be a separate?
yeah, correct, yeah.
That's what they're gonna tell us
Yeah.
for that
On
amount?
top of, the health risk assessment as
Okay.
well, so yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Duty.
Mayor Black, and maybe through you to Scott, I think what we want to know around the table, who is the person that's going to tell us that we should not allow anyone there? Is there one person that is going to step forward and make that decision to let us know that we should be using it or we should not be using it?
That's called leadership.
Instead, or are we dealing with 3 or 4 agencies?
The mayor needs to do
Public
that.
Health Unit is the lead agency that we're dealing with. They do have discussions with MOE and Public Health Ontario toxicologists to get their information, what they provide us.
Your levels are 25 times higher than
Yeah.
acceptable.
Public Health Unit and Public Health Ontario, their division, is our leading recommendations that we receive advice on whether or not regular activity can continue for the time being or not.
So I think it's fair to ask. So you, as the mayor of our municipality, you will make that decision from, as you mentioned, the health unit or whoever. You're going to get the word from one person that is responsible in this province to say, you should not be letting people in the park, or it is okay to have people in the park.
Well, I believe this consultant that we hire will give us his interpretation of what needs to be done at the park too. All I can say is if any person from any of those agencies, because I respect fully the MOE, Public Health Unit, and Public Health Ontario, if one person from any of those agencies would have told me they thought I should close the park, I would have closed the park and brought it back to council for a discussion, and then council could have went to find whatever expert in the world they chose to review that recommendation and decide what the future of the park is. Not a single person with any expertise has told me that we should consider closing the park at this point in time.
Good to know.
Councillor Campbell.
I have a question. I'm going to backtrack here because Porkpine Health Unit made the statement that there, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that there was minimal risk to people using the park. What did they base that on, that we are doing further testing here? I'm for safety too, but the Porkpine Health Unit did come out and say there was minimal risk to using the park. What was the basis for that decision?
So again, the basis for that is the soil sampling we've done to date. The program we're going to do now is to decide the remedial action required in the park to return it to zero metal content. So we're not looking for a change in pace. I don't believe we'll receive a change in pace. We want to know which areas of the park we need to remove soil in and put new clean soil in, whether we need a 1-inch cap, a 6-centimeter cap, or a foot cap on the park to return it to acceptable zero metal content throughout the park.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I believe we have a resolution to approve that as well.
Moved by Walter Vazoschik, seconded by Noella Ronaldo. Be it resolved, the council does hereby approve awarding AMEC Foster Wheeler the contract for completing a due diligence human risk assessment at the Hollinger Park in the amount of $40,000 plus HST.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. The next item is the borrowing bylaw with Scotia Bank. And that comes back at the bylaw section for approval if there's no questions on the report.